We all have what I call a self-war. And I was reading this morning on somebody's blog, and it just gave me some great insight to the fact that for those of us that are in recovery, we all have a self-war. I have a war with a few things that I absolutely am in touch with and have to manage, or else my life will start to slowly descend into upheaval and create a vulnerability for relapse. So today I want to talk to you about why it is absolutely vital that you understand what your personal self-war is. And if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about why you want to know what your spouse's self-war is, whether it be betrayed or whether it be unfaithful. The unfortunate reality about your self-war is that it is identified only through an incredible amount of pain or tragedy or trauma. So I can hear the voice in your head saying, well, Samuel, guess what? I'm in the perfect spot to understand what my self-war is. It just, unfortunately, has to come that way. For me, going through all that I've been through, the mistakes that I've made, the carnage that has happened because of my choices, it's done a lot of things, and it would take a million blogs to identify them all. But one thing it's done for sure is it has absolutely identified a self-war that I have to fight. In fact, I think I have, at last count, about 4 wars that I know that I have to manage and navigate through. I think what you have to understand is proper recovery, good, strong, expert recovery tools and principles and methods and therapists are going to help you identify what that self-war is. If you don't know what your self-war is, quite frankly, I'm worried about you. Because what that tells me is, number one, you're not aware of your blind spots, and it's very disturbing if your spouse who's been unfaithful is unaware of their blind spots. Number 2 is you're vulnerable in areas that you're not aware of. And so you may be fighting a war with yourself, but you're actually interpreting it as though you're fighting with your spouse. And Rick says this all the time, my spouse is not my problem, it just reveals the problem in me. I hated that statement. I wanted to stab Rick's eyes out whenever he said that, and it only works when both spouses believe that. And so practicing that is a bit of a challenge, but there is truth to it. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree that my spouse simply reveals the problems inside of me. And hopefully your spouse will get to that point too. That's just a side note. But when you don't know what your self-war is, you're at war, but you don't know why, and in reality you're probably fighting with yourself more than you're fighting with your spouse. Additionally, if you don't know what your self-war is, for the unfaithful, I got to tell you, relapse is practically guaranteed because you don't know how to prevent yourself from falling prey to the war that took you down in the first place. So I want to encourage you, if you're an unfaithful spouse, man, you've got to get the right help because you can get an expert's help to identify what the war is that you're fighting so that you can understand how to fight back. Perfect example. I'm helping a great friend start a church here in Austin. And he and I were talking, and we've known each other for a couple of decades, but he had to talk to his board, and they had to go through some different, discussions and disclosures. And so I don't know that he did it the right way. In fact, I'm pretty sure that he did not do it the right way, but I was just going about my day, and a week ago I got a couple of texts from him. And let's just say they are not text messages that you would receive every day. They were simply questions, and he said, hey, when you were in the ministry, blah, 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 and it was a good kick in the teeth. And I just was like, oh. I mean, it was it just was hard. I mean, there were so many allegations and so much crap surrounding my affair when I was in a very public position that he had to ask these questions, and I respect the fact that he had to ask them. He probably could have asked them a better way, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. He had to ask them. And I was tempted to fall prey to one of the wars I fight. And one of the wars I fight is the battle against shame. And quite honestly, at this point, I answered the text message. I gave him the answer. He was thrilled. And shame tried to just beat me up where several years ago, I probably would have circled the drain for a few hours or maybe even a day. But this time I was like, yeah, we're good. You know what? I put myself here. And so let me back up and say I did a few exercises. Number one is I was truthful. Number two is I really self-talked myself out of the dungeon. I said, no, hey, that was 10 years ago. I did what I did. It's nobody's fault but my own. I'm healed. I'm strong. I'm a new person. I don't live there anymore. And this is part of the consequences to my choices. But I don't have to live in shame. Then I called a buddy of mine and we laughed about it and joked about it. We also joked about the lack of tact that the friend of mine used. And we just laughed. And I went on down the road. It was about a 20-minute deal several years ago. It may have been a few hours, a full day. But that's one of the wars I fight. I fight a battle against illegitimacy. I fight a battle against striving. But I know what my self-wars are. Samantha knows what my self-wars are and what her self-wars are. So I want to encourage you today. If you're in the middle of pain, if you're in the middle of trauma, and I know that you are if you're on this site, find out what your self-war is. Get the right help. Do the work, because you're going to need to fight this battle. And there's going to be seasons where it's easy and seasons where it's hard. But if you'll do the work, you'll be able to fight that battle and win.